Hello, listeners, and welcome to today's Cult News. I'm your speaker, Casey, host of the Cult Vault podcast, and this news is a roundup of the week 4 of the Danny Masterson retrial. If you want more in-depth coverage or information on this case, you can check out TonyOrtega.org or follow Tony Ortega on Twitter, and also Aaron Levin-Smith's Growing Up in Scientology for court reports and updates. At the end of week 3, Jane Doe 2 had finished a very difficult time on the witness stand, and after a 4-day break, it was time for defense attorney Philip Cohen to cross-examine Jane Doe. Cohen focused on Jane Doe's alcohol consumption, so much so that Judge Olmedo admonished him for this, with Jane Doe 2 finishing cross-examination by lunchtime. According to the transcripts, Jane Doe 2 recalled the many times she reached out to Masterson following brutal attacks to explain during her testimonies that she was trying to figure out what had happened and just trying to survive. Jane Doe 2's best friend Rachel S. then took the stand to testify, corroborating much of what Jane Doe 2's testimony had said, with Jordan Ladd being the last witness of the day, telling the court how Jane Doe 2 had told Ladd in confidence that she had repeatedly told Masterson no to having sex. And by May 10th, it seemed all hell broke loose in the Danny Masterson retrial. Tony Ortega reported that Scientology's attorneys, separate to this trial and case, had somehow been given access to the prosecution's discovery and documents. Leah Remini broke what this all meant down in a thread in her blog that read, "I have some important news to share, news that has frustrated and angered me. In the rape trial of Scientologist Danny Masterson yesterday, the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office revealed that Scientology has covertly obtained a significant amount of criminal discovery materials. Scientology has no reason to have criminal discovery materials in its possession. No reason at all. Scientology, which should be a co-defendant in this trial, has repeatedly lied, saying it has no covert involvement in this trial. But longtime Scientology attorney Vicky Podboreski made a colossal error last week. Vicky, who receives her orders directly from Captain David Miscavige, emailed the DA's office to complain about how Scientology was being treated in the Danny Masterson trial. But when Vicky was sending an email, she made a grave error. She included a link in her email. When the DA's office clicked on that link, they were shocked to see a massive amount of their own criminal discovery. This is the same criminal discovery the DA shared with Danny Masterson's defense team. This is a huge deal. This confirms that Scientology, which has tax exemption based on its religious status, is colluding with Danny Masterson and his defense team. The judge immediately asked Danny's defense attorney, Philip Cohen, if he shared the discovery with Scientology. Cohen said no. While I don't believe Cohen, a slimy, victim-shaming attorney who somehow manages to sleep at night even though he takes his orders from Captain David Miscavige, there are other possibilities of who could have shared these materials with Scientology. Sean Holley, Danny's other defense attorney, who has a sign in her office that says, "Don't cloud the argument with facts." Sean has spent more time trying to get me thrown out of court when I'm present to support the Jane Does than defending her client. Danny's previous attorney, Thomas Messereau, who Cohen replaced, also had access to this discovery. It could easily be Danny and his family who handed over the discovery to Scientology. They are all Scientologists who believe they are above the law. Scientology policy requires Scientologists to turn over these materials. It could have been one of Danny's buddies in his crew of Scientologists called the Donkey Punch Bunch. These Scientologists who participated in a conspiracy to obstruct justice in this case and all other cases to protect Scientology. I have great respect for defense attorneys and especially public defenders. They're an essential part of our deeply flawed criminal justice system, but I don't respect defense attorneys who spend their time doing Scientology's bidding. There is nothing Scientology and Scientologists won't do to infiltrate government offices, organizations, and institutions. There's nothing Scientology won't do to obtain the intel it needs to protect itself. It has literally been Scientology policy for 7 decades. Those of us who fight against Scientology's abuses have been trying to get the media and law enforcement officials and others to understand how Scientology operates. We've warned them that Scientology will stop at nothing to infiltrate this trial, the jury, the LAPD, and the DA's office, but we've been largely waved off. After you've done reading this post, please read this thread about certain LAPD officials collude with Scientology. The outcome of these events is yet to be determined, but Judge Charlene Olmedo has discussed needing to pick this up post-trial and investigate officially. The prosecution then brought some LAPD witnesses to the stand to speak to the possible collusion between Scientology and the LAPD, with certain things not being followed up on and certain officers being replaced on certain cases. On May 11th, it came to light that Detective Reyes, who was a figure in the first trial, was called to the stand for the prosecution. Originally, she had been used in the first trial by the defense to call into question cross-contamination of witnesses. It was revealed in the first trial that the Jane Does had all found each other and began talking in solidarity. Philip Cohen, for the defense, suggests that this is cross-contamination, but Reyes took to the stand to say that's not necessarily true, with the afternoon being spent by Cohen being perplexed by this as he cross-examined the witness. In the first trial, another alleged victim of Masterson's testified to him being a sexual abuser, although he was not being charged with the rape of Tricia Vesey. In this retrial, it was Kathleen J who came forward to do the same, speaking of horrific abuse that she had endured at the hands of Danny Masterson in a time before the assaults against the three Jane Does took place. Philip Cohen for the defense then cross-examined the witness, calling into question a 2021 interview with a journalist, using this to throw doubt on Kathleen J's testimony. The journalist in question was none other than Tony Ortega, the pool reporter for the retrial, who was then subpoenaed with the potential of being brought in as a testifying witness, despite being the person bringing the live updates from the courtroom. Like I said, it was a wild week in court. But just like that, the very next day, both the prosecution and the defense rested, claiming that they would be bringing no more witnesses to the stand. It appears the threat of bringing witnesses in for the defense was just that, as usual, a threat. Judge Charlene Olmedo laid out jury instructions, and with that we are ready to go to closing arguments and jury deliberations, which we expect to take place this week, and perhaps by this time next week we will have a verdict in the Danny Masterson retrial, where he is accused of the forcible rape of 3 different women between 2001 and 2003. I'll be sure to bring any updates on this. Until then, head over to Twitter to follow Tony Ortega, and I will be back with more information on Danny Masterson next week. That is the end of today's Cult News. Join me tomorrow for some different news. I'm your speaker, Casey, host of the Cult Vault podcast.